Hi everyone, this is Ezzoubeir from International Morocco, and this is the first podcast that I host jointly with Gari Sullivan. Gari Sullivan, how are you?
I'm fine. How are you?
Very, very well, thank you. Okay, so we talked about something last week, and we decided that it's going to be our first podcast. The subject was very, very interesting. You talked about something that you termed as the Netflix generation.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So, tell us what the Netflix generation is in Morocco.
So the Netflix generation is, it kind of is what it says it is, which is the people who are growing up on Netflix. To be a little bit more general, it's people who have much easier, much constant access to Western style culture to do with television, music, songs, things like that, box sets, series, TV series, films to some extent. But I know we're going to talk a little bit about Hollywood and the influence Hollywood has. But really, the key thing about the Netflix generation is the range of Western broadcast culture that it gets its access to, and the availability of that.
Okay, so I think Hollywood did a very good job for a long time portraying the Western culture. How do you think this is different?
So, I think Hollywood has always had this American dream image. Hollywood to a huge extent is a propaganda machine for the United States. And Hollywood is the film industry. And if you look at the television industry from the United States from the 70s and the 80s, it was not that good. Most of the money was being put into Hollywood films, and they had this, like I say, this propaganda of the American dream. Whereas now that's completely flipped on its head, and there's a lot of money in these subscription television channels like Netflix. It's where the money is, it's where the big stars are, and they are allowed to develop characters and conflicts and drama over a number of series over a number of years. So there are so many facets to the Netflix generation that Hollywood could never produce. So there's more money, there's more time spent on this, there's greater international access. You can do more controversial storylines than you could in movies. So there's almost no comparison between the two.
Okay, does the user experience has to do with this? For instance, the fact that we can access Netflix on the internet and we can have like a personal connection with it instead of watch it with family, and how does that affect this generation?
Well, I think all you have to do is imagine watching something controversial with your parents in the same room. It feels awkward. It feels a bit uncomfortable. It's kind of embarrassing sometimes, depending on what it is. But now you're seeing all of this in the comfort of your own room with your own peer group as well. A lot of these things are shared online. You watch it in your bedroom, your friend watches it in their bedroom, and you talk about it. So you are, in one sense, watching it in isolation because you are away from your parents and you are initially interacting with that program on your own. But then you can talk about it within your peer group.
Are we talking here about a category of the society that has access to Netflix and that consumes programs produced by Netflix? Or are we talking about an age group, specific age group, when we say the Netflix generation? And if that's the case, what is the age range that we're talking about here?
Yeah, I think it is more to. I think it's a combination of the two. I think we're looking at people at the age range of, I would say, probably at the bottom end, 10 years old, and at the top end, maybe into their early 20s. And although I know people younger than that and older than that have access to Netflix, that's not really the Netflix generation, because if you're older than that, then you've been brought up with another level of technology. And so Netflix seems to be new to you. It is these Western dramas and controversial subjects that they deal with that are being watched by the teenage Moroccan population.
If it's an age group, what do you think are the distinctive features of this age group, and why do we have to label them as the Netflix generation?
I don't think we have to. I think some of that is just falling into the whole media trap, I suppose. I mean, it's convenient to name them that.
Yeah, if they're different, if they're different as a generation, they should go by a name, right?
Yeah, for sure. I guess calling it the Netflix generation is the controversial point. Giving that generation a name, I think, is probably something, like you say, is quite essential. Yeah. I would say the generation before the Netflix generation, if you like, is the Facebook generation. Okay. I think the difference between the Facebook generation and the Netflix generation, the Facebook generation wanted change and demanded it and started that process of getting it. The Netflix generation behave as if they've already got it. And so it's a bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy. They behave so they kind of have it because that's the lifestyle that they are working in. So that's the lifestyle that then becomes the lifestyle of normality.
So you're talking about the changes that the Facebook generation were demanding. The Netflix generation acts as if they've already achieved those demands.
Exactly. And so the argument then is, because they're behaving as if they've already achieved it, they have by default already achieved it.
So are you insinuating that the Netflix generation is freer, is more free?
Yep. Yep. And they are more free because because they are more free, but B, because they behave as if they're more free. It's whereas with somebody like the group like the Facebook generation, they were saying we're not free and we want to be free, and that's completely justified. When we have now with the Netflix generation, we have this we're free, we're going to behave as if we're free, and try stopping us. And I guess that's the attitudinal change. With the Facebook generation, it's we want this. With the Netflix generation, it's we think we've got this. Now try and convince us that we don't.
And now we can identify this generation. We kind of have an idea about the distinctive features. We can identify them as an age group. How should we treat them, considering that they're, as you said, more free? So how should we treat them? For example, if we have an issue with them or want to convince them of something, how should we deal with them?
Well, the first thing you do is you don't stop it. You should never stop change. History tells us one thing: it's stopping change never works. So a wise government, and I actually think the king, the royal family, are doing a great job here. Because I think they know that change is happening in Morocco, and they're letting it go. Because if the two negative responses that you can do with change is try to stop it, and that won't work because that just drives it underground. It makes it criminal. You get a black economy. You get all sorts of problems with rise of gangs, and depending on how much prohibition you put on it. But we just have to look at the United States in the 1920s to realize that prohibition to a huge extent doesn't work. It's the same with the war on drugs. We've had the war on drugs since the 1960s, and people still take drugs. Yeah. So you don't criminalize it. The second thing that you should never do, and this is particularly true of teenage groups, is make it look as if you are rebelling against authority if you do this thing, because that is just adding fuel to the flame.
And also, there is no way to stop this Netflix generation. And just the name says that it's an internet situation, and as long as you can't cut off the internet completely, you will not be able to stop this
Yep.
any change that happens today.
So what you do is you influence the change. You can't stop it. You can't control it either. What you can do is influence it, but that influence can only be for the betterment of that change.
When we talked about the podcast, we promised that the podcast is going to be as short as possible. And I'm very happy that we covered all the questions. And I think we have a fairly good idea about the Netflix generation, something that we can draw the attention of the viewers to and probably discuss it further.
Yeah, and it would be really interesting to get their opinion about this. I mean, I am not of the Netflix generation. I know that might surprise you, but I'm not 14. So have I got this right? I mean, this is purely my observation of younger people. I work a lot with young people.
I was going to say something else.
You had another question, one final question.
Yeah, one final question, yes. So I was just asking, were you the one that coined this term, the Netflix generation, or is it something that you picked up from?
Well, I've never had anybody else use it. So in that sense, I would say I've coined it, but I think it's a fairly obvious, an obvious title. So I wouldn't be surprised if other people have made the same observations that I've made.
Okay. All right. So I think this was a very, very nice discussion. What do you think?
Yeah, very interesting. And I think that it's going to spark a lot of debate. I really do.
Hope so.
Because Morocco isn't talking about this. I think it's happening, but Morocco isn't looking at this. They're not talking about this. And I think maybe it's because the older generations are too worried about drawing attention to this change, because they think that might speed it up, and it probably will, to be honest. But change is happening in Morocco. You cannot deny that. And by pretending it doesn't exist or trying to stop it from happening is going to be a disaster.
Yeah.
And it won't work.
Yeah, and I was also thinking about the implications of this for the government, for people, and for recruiters as well. So, for example, recruiters at a certain point, they struggled to understand the millennials, us, and there was a lot of research to talk about the psychological specificities of this group and how to keep them working, because at a certain point they lost any interest in a professional career, or it happens to millennials at a specific period in their life that they're not interested in a career because they don't feel fulfilled and so forth. So now the research has helped recruiters better understand this generation. And I think just raising this issue will help recruiters understand the Netflix generation and how to deal with it. Thank you, Gary, for your time. Do you want to say something? Do you want to?
Thank you for the opportunity. I always appreciate it. Look forward to the next one.
Yeah, let's do it next week.
For sure.
Okay. Talk to you later.
Bye.
Bye.